I was trying to like go down to Peterson's level because like what you just said would go fly right over his head. Like Peterson is like really low hanging fruit.
He's clueless when it comes to metaphysics, but he thinks he's a super genius at science.
So you would say, Darth, that Planet Peterson is like, he's no good in metaphysics or philosophy. He's like a very weak.
He's like most skeptics.
Yeah.
Where they think they have a mastery of defending things like evolution or the Big Bang or sciencey stuff, but they're not well versed or adept at debating metaphysics.
Really, teaching science as if it's sort of a religion, right? So at one point during the debate, he goes, "Let's think of this like hypothetical religion, right?" And I go, "How about science?" And he did not like that because he really treats science like it's an absolute truth.
Because he's an atheistic naturalist while pretending to be an agnostic. This idea that he's an agnostic is all pretense. Okay, so he's basically a functional naturalist. And when you're people who are functional naturalists, they have disdain for philosophical analysis or even metaphysical categories because they're empiricists, they're positivists.
It would be self-defeating, right? Darth being a positivist.
Well, positivism was historically prior to logical positivism. Positivism rose its ugly head in the early part of the 18th century and had a big influence on Darwin, saying we will only resort to pure human reason and human experience alone, not only to explain the present, but the past. Okay, that was not seen. Okay, and this is what's called positivism. Okay, this positivist mentality led into the 20th century to the logical positivists who said that only those things that can be established through our sensory apparatus are to be considered true or meaningful. See, even
how do you justify that belief, Darth, through our sensory apparatus?
J.P. Moreland was giving a lecture about, I think, the evolutionary mentality. And he was reading a quote from a book, and I had the book. So I paused the videotape. I went to the book in my electronic library, and I pulled it up. And I noticed that he swapped out the word positivist because he knew that the audience would not be familiar with it. And I was impressed that he swapped out the word for naturalists or materialists. Because although it was not a word-for-word citation in the book, he replaced it with a word that the audience would understand. They're not going to understand the word positivism unless you qualify it. And when you're giving a lecture like that, you don't have time to go into it like I just went into. Yeah. But so the positivists decided, following the Enlightenment, that human reason and sense experience alone is the ultimate and only authority to make determinations about the past and the present.
Yeah. Darth, would you say that? Darth, I wanted to ask you. So, like, a lot of atheists will try to use, the neo-Darwinian evolutionary theory, right, to try to debunk theism, right? But even though neo-Darwinian evolution theory is like a really bad theory, right? How does it? Even if we grant that theory, how does it follow that God wouldn't exist?
It doesn't logically follow.
Yes, because someone like Planet Peterson tries to always say, "Oh, we have evolutionary theory and stuff like that." Even if that's true, right?
Well, he doesn't understand evolution to the extent that he thinks he does. Yes. You have to remember that I think he just has a BA in science, and he used to teach school children. Okay. And so his level of expertise has gone to his head, what he thinks, right? So the point is, does he even have a clue that the fossil record exemplifies stasis and not transition? Probably not. He probably thinks, he has this false belief that the fossil record robustly represents transition when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Does he understand, like, forgive me, P. Mars, but Dr. Koonin, one of the world's great experts on evolution microbiology, says it's virtually impossible for self-replicating systems to come up with the genome of the animal kingdom in a single universe.
Yeah.
Those are his words. Virtually impossible. So most of these people who think that they're knowledgeable, see, a lot of them have this attitude. In fact, most of them have this attitude that since you don't accept evolution, what is at the root of the problem is that you aren't educated on evolution. If you really understood evolution, you would embrace it. You would fall in love with evolution.
You know what's crazy in these debates? If I ever say make a appeal to like something's virtually impossible, they'll say, "Well, it's only virtually impossible. It could happen." Like, what are you talking about?
That's like a direct quote out of Dumb and Dumber. You mean there's still a chance?
Yeah, 1 in a million. So you're saying there's a chance?
They don't understand that they ordinarily, in their day-to-day life, they don't operate this way. Once something reaches an improbability beyond a certain thing, it's considered to be effectively impossible.
Well, people do this to me. They bicker with me that, well, it's only virtually impossible, so it could have happened.
Oh, okay, good. So then you're going to have to throw out. See, well, then what you need to do is you use that against them, right? You use metaphysical jujitsu on them. So if they're going to say that even if something is virtually statistically impossible, it could still happen, then chance could be causing the apparent regularities and not laws of nature. Okay, the reason why they accept laws of nature is due to the near statistical, if not near statistical possibility of chance producing these regularities.
Darth, if they say that, well, I mean, in epistemology, right? When you have a very low probability in something, right, you would have a defeater for it, right? Because absolute certainty doesn't really exist, right? It's all through
No. Whenever people raise the issue of certitude, almost always, I'm not going to say never, but almost always, it's irrelevant.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So when he said, when the individual is saying, even though it's virtually impossible, right, it can still happen. Aren't they invoking some sort of?
Look, they don't live this way. Okay, these people,
they don't live this way.
They're bullshitting at this point.
Exactly.
Okay, look, there was a state Supreme Court ruling having to do with Democrats getting the first slot on the printed or election ballots over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, throughout the state, the Supreme Court of that state ruled that although they couldn't show that it is absolutely impossible, the statistical near impossibility was so great they had to conclude that cheating was going on.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So once something is a situation of either complex functionality or meaningfulness, and it's way beyond what statisticians call the probability bound, it's considered to be effectively impossible.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we were playing poker and Darth dealt himself a royal flush, we might suspect he was cheating because of the statistic rarity of that ever happening.
Well, I ask this question all the time. If you and I were playing poker and I deal the cards and we play 5 hands in a row, and each time I get a royal flush and each of you guys get no matching cards, whose hand is more statistically likely? In other words, they both are.
Yeah.
Okay? They don't realize that the precise card sequence in no matching hands has precisely the same statistical occurrence as a royal flush. But it's deemed improbable, okay, is because there's no significance or meaning attributed to the 5-card sequence where there's no matching cards. Suppose I dealt you 5 cards, right? And you wrote down each of the 5 cards, and they don't have to be in any particular sequence. There's no matching cards, there's no sequence to it, right? You hand me the cards back, I shuffle the deck, okay? And then I just randomly deal out 5 cards, and it's the exact same 5 cards I first dealt out again. And suppose I put them back in the deck again and I shuffle it again. It would be the same as getting the royal flush 5 times in a row. It's just that the particular sequence isn't meaningful.
Well, and plus there's more combinations. Like there's only 4 combinations of a royal flush. Yeah. There's a lot of combinations.
It's because the sequence is significantly meaningful. So for example, if we had 3,000 letters of Scrabble letters randomly selected versus 3,000 letters of the Declaration of Independence, the very specific sequence of the first Scrabble letters has the same improbability or probability, if you will, than the Declaration of Independence sequence. It's because there's no meaning attributed to the first sequence, but with the 3,000 letters of the Declaration of Independence, it's highly meaningful combined with a high improbability, and this is why people will think that there's trickery involved.
And so, Darth, would you say like things that are virtually statistically impossible, right?
What?
You would say it's very irrational to believe in those, right? Like even because it's sort of like saying, because it's logically possible, I could be the lottery winner, even though it's statistically, it's virtually impossible.
No. The issue is this, all right? When you combine astronomical remoteness with either complex functionality or highly meaningfulness, then we typically, as human beings, reject chance as an explanation.
Yeah.
I would say that in the instance of the resurrection, it would be like statistically unlikely, but we would believe it based on like witnesses.
Well, I don't understand why they object to the resurrection, because they believe that life came from rocks.
Well, that would be an example. I'm thinking of something that's
they believe that life arose from non-living matter.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, we could believe something that's statistically unlikely, but if there was eyewitness accounts for it, I think it would be rational to believe it.
If there's credible eyewitnesses, but of course they're going to argue against it. Welcome, Pant. What would you like to say?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I should want to say that is one of my problems with atheism, is that probability, as you say, like that we came from rocks, it has to have the same amount of probability as Jesus resurrected.
Oh, actually, it's far worse. Jesus didn't resurrect due to natural circumstances. He was supernaturally resurrected. But the point is, when you say to them, so you don't believe Christ rose again from the dead. So what you're saying is non-living matter couldn't, life could not arise from non-living matter. Right? But that's what they believe in abiogenesis and evolution. What is the probability we came from rocks? 0.
But Darth, like, if they say like it's virtually impossible for the resurrection, wouldn't that be presupposing physicalism or materialism?
They're not in a position to assert probabilities, because only in a world where God exists can probabilities even be meaningful.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Because probabilities are subject to ultimate background information, but in their world, nothing is identifiable and defensible as ultimately static. Okay, so in order to have probabilities, you have to have certain things that are static and those that are dynamic. Okay, but what is ultimately static in their model of reality? You see, in the Christian worldview, God has ordained that some things will be static and other things will be irregular.
Yeah.
Well, you have to understand they are representing themselves in hot pursuit of truth and reason about the world, but that's simply not the case. They're suffering from a severe case of confirmation bias to special plead and ad hoc rescue their way from acknowledging God as creator. What do I mean by static? Is something that does not and will not change. So God, who is the ultimate exemplar of being static in terms of his essential properties, has implemented a world where certain things are static while other things are dynamic. But even those things that are static, God is going to eradicate and recreate the world back to its original pristine state. But in the unbeliever's world, everything is shrouded in mystery. So what they believe that some things are static is a figment of their imagination. They would not be able to metaphysically account for what it is they claim that is static. Well, why don't you, Narwhal, why don't you come up and explain to me how I'm stuck in a negative confirmation bias? Everybody has confirmation bias.